the invitation, Malini and Sophie. Malini is actually the culprit for putting me onto this topic of eating as a method through her own work in Amsterdam a long time ago. I wanted to also acknowledge that I speak from Darugland today. I live and write on Darugan Gandhanara country in the Blue Mountains. I have been taught by Pidandara people in the central desert of Australia. And I'm celebrating NAIDOC Week at the moment through films, through theatre visits, while Palestine is unraveling. Being the tail end of today's fantastic workshop, I can't help but make connections with my own thinking with the work of the previous speakers. So we had thinking through cutting stones, thanks Daniel. We had thinking through being there on the shore. We had thinking through objects that move, like mobile phones. We had thinking through graphic novels. We had thinking through life histories. We had thinking through maps. And now we're trying to think through eating. Ethnographers eat. They eat when they work with the people whose lives and cultures they seek to explore. They nourish their body with the food of their hosts, sharing meals and foodways in everyday life and on special occasions such as weddings, rituals, all kinds of celebrations, rites of passages. They might go hungry in the company of those who live hard. As they eat, they learn. They learn what is considered edible, how to prepare a meal, how to eat, when to eat with food, when not to eat. As they ingest dishes and flavors and scents, ethnographers invite cultural knowledge at close hand. This is anything but sheer observation. Rather, through putting stuff into their mouth, taste, chew and swallow and digest, hopefully, they also experience culture and thus learn. To paraphrase Anna-Marie Mould's, philosopher, anthropologist Anna-Marie Mould's paper from 2008 on how to think through eating an apple, anthropologists get involved physically with whatever they may be theorizing about. As we eat, we enter into a consubstantial relationship with the ecology at different scales. So food mediates relationships with people and environment, and that's one of the dimensions I'm trying to tease out, the socio-materiality of the material turn, and that is so beautifully embodied in eating. But I also want to match that up a little bit with the entangled other side of the coin, the moral economy, the power structures, the inequality, the cultural differences. So I'm going to take you to the two of my field sites very briefly. Pokacha is an Anawapiyandara community in the very north of South Australia. I'll quickly show you the map. I'm here. That's to show you here. So the very north of South Australia, these are the traditional owners of Ayers Rock, which is of course Uluru in the Northern Territory. But these are state boundaries that are irrelevant when it comes to tradition of these states. And where I have been a guest since 1995, working on art, on children's play, on sense storytelling, and on the idea of nature through the prism of Bible translators. So I went with 20 desert women in 2015 to Palestine to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, which is another story. I just wanted, and then the second field site is, the Ruhr Valley, my other home, which was Europe's industrial powerhouse, really. 500 coal mines, deep anthracite coal, steel, everything that comes with it. A multicultural working class society radically quickly coming into being from the 1850s onwards. The last mine closed in 2018, and I want to know from the industrial workers, male and female, what does nature mean to you? What's the nature of the proletarian nature that you have practiced all along in the current climate of turning the entire rural region into a green industry hub, into a restored natural ecology? What are the stories that unravel? So I'm looking at the one hand into the stories and practices in allotment gardens and so forth of industrial workers, coal miners, steel workers, chemical factory workers, textile workers. On the other hand, what are the life experiences of the so-called growing precariat, new workers that have no contracts, that there's no resemblance to normal labor relations? So that's the project in the war. So that's where the moral economy is a little bit more foregrounded in the socio-materiality. So, but just to make you aware, that's come through in every single talk so far, it is dangerous to talk of just field sites as geographical bounded places, not just because we use mobile phones, of course, but because we're always situated. We're not just in a particular place that has its own geographical, ecological, historical, lingual, and so forth parameters, but I always eat in certain moments of time, of my own state of well-being, my own political evolving orientation, religious convictions, doubts, commitments, right? So what I'm trying to do today is I plucked out some what I, with more, define as exemplary situations of eating and move these across sites, occasions, mediums, and perspectives of understanding. I don't do that actually indirectly, more or less. So welcome to Pajara. Where I have spent altogether 3 years in this desert community of about 500 people on the APY lands in northern South Australia. Very important, this land is held under freehold title. You need a permit to enter it. You have to give a good reason of why you want to come. In this part of the world, consubstantiality is of the essence. You share something, the matter that goes into your body that you eat from country makes a substantial relationship with the environment and with the people who own that particular place from which you eat, on which you eat. So a whole cosmology rests on this kind of relationship. Not that I entered the dreaming so dear to first Australians. That would have required a whole different kind of immigration, of ritual training, of better language training, of not going away all the time. But people do tell me that I belong in some way because I keep coming back and with them on country. So Margaret, my friend Margaret Dag, she's a major Bible translator here, an artist. And Katrina Kita, great educator, also Bible translator, and you can ask me questions about that later. We're coming of age a little bit together, and they're telling me, do you remember in 1995 when you first came? You couldn't wait, We were telling you to wait for us so that we can travel together to our camp, which I didn't realize was a male initiation camp. So after 5 hours of waiting, I thought she forgot about me, and I drove off. Only to be blocked by men rattling spears and nearly sending me back home all the way to Germany. And then the women all rising up and saying, but she's like a child, she doesn't know, she doesn't understand what she's doing, and she's German and she couldn't wait any longer. So. Then Maya Maharaj, one of the elder ladies, adopted me as a daughter and baked for 3 months a loaf of bread in an oven, in a drum oven for me. And that feeding, she's long deceased, so I work with her daughter, who is an elder herself now. That feeding me, teaching me, is the same thing, basically, growing me up, and as they say, is what made us kiddie. I'm also become somebody who knows people who have walked before us, so they're carrying the lives of the deceased together. I get phone calls all the time just updating who has passed away. Right? Another important dimension is the classification of foods. I learned a lot about settler colonialism country by hunting rabbits with the women who were like a plague when I started in the 90s. They've been eradicated by the calicivirus, by the government, the ranger program and stuff. So women are pretty sad about that because the main staple food, and you were allowed to pour lots of salt onto them. You can also pour a lot of salt on a frozen kangaroo tail that you buy in the local store, which has been trucked from Alice Springs, 480 kilometers up the road. You pour salt on that when you cook it in an earth oven. Hang on, did I have one before? Back oven? Yeah. Because these animals did not come from country, the local estates. If you shoot a kangaroo on country, which women also do, you can't put salt on it. So there's this interesting classification of food items. Even these introduced animals eat the native grasses, and they become indigenized to an extent. There are boundaries to how much they can belong. So I'm talking a little bit about multi-species forms of eating in the food. there's a whole paper on the social etiquette, cultural laws of sharing food, which type of the animal, hunted animal, is to be given to which relatives. I won't go into that. What I want to do is now shift the situatedness of my thinking and frame this as a kind of eating in the Anthropocene. So the immersive, convivial, relational practice of eating country connects with wider efforts to push against the modernist view of human bodies in rather than as environments, indeed against the ontological opposition of subject and object. A turn towards the material dimensions of production and consumption, towards the senses, embodiment, affect, is reshaping ethnographies of eating in the Anthropocene. Two German scholars, Heidke and Weaver, but they wrote this interesting paper, More Than Human Eating, Reconfiguring Environment-Body-Mind Relations in the Anthropocene, write that food and eating emerges a set of practices that introduce ambiguities into received modern understandings of subjectivity and objectivity, something that delivers the environment directly into us, relates us to the environment, breaks with our assumed boundaries, and turns us into the environment. Well, my animal friends would say that that's what we've been doing all along. I won't explain all the images, they're sort of like a background movie. Let me turn to the other dimension that I want to flag, the moral economy of eating. It's already been present in what I've been saying, namely when I spoke about sharing and belonging, of being a guest and being dependent on hosts who guide me and feed me, when I talk about indigenous and settler foods. But I now want to turn explicitly to class and cultural difference. In fact, it was E.P. Thompson, who introduced the term moral economy in his famous 1963 book, The Making of the English Working Class, when he grappled with the 1795 food riots. As I tease out aspects of the moral economy of eating, I bring into view at the same time another dimension of working ethnographically through foodways. And that's quite important, and I don't think I've fully, I need Malini's help here to think through this better and more precisely. How do we make eating an explicit method of encountering and understanding cultural difference, tensions, and social inequality, or other things you want to learn about, right? So not just how do I really understand other people's practices of eating, of tasting, of experiencing country, but how can we use eating as a method of generating knowledge? So in Germany, I already explained the project that I'm doing there. Have a look, there's this central, strangely looking, more straight river. The Ruhr region is called the Ruhr because it is framed by two rivers, the Lippe in the north, the Ruhr in the south. They both flow into the Rhine, but in the middle, the central river Emscher, on which I grew up, was turned in 1895 into an open sewer. It was a heavily industrialized waterway. This is the world's largest complete fluvial water restoration project that put that entire sewer underground now and have put in new meanders, which this old map doesn't reflect yet, and a whole ecology and life world is evolving there, precariously done. My own research, together with a historian and a couple of artists, with the working class people of the Ruhr, is happening at a time of extreme tensions. This is a society in decline, in the grip of polarization between different forms of labor, but also, very wealthy people and very poor people, and also between, I have to say, Muslims and non-Muslim populations. So, especially since October the 7th, we had a massive number of attacks on local mosques, but also on local synagogues. And, we had problems talking to people and not broaching this conflict. It was just there all along. So what I do, I eat at the daily lunch table for the poor of the Catholic Church. I eat with Germans, Polish migrants, and Syrian refugees in allotment gardens, in the home of a young Turkish family, at festivals and on markets. Industrial workers tell us of the important social work that clubs and associations do for society. They also tell us that food and drink at the many festivals throughout the year, harvest festivals, markets for the Christmas time, shooting festivals, are always cited by their Muslim neighbors as the reason why they cannot participate. The German workers perceive the Islamic dietary laws as creating cultural segregation. They feel alienated in their own neighborhoods. More and more foreigners have moved in. They don't even speak proper German anymore. It's a very, very difficult process at the moment. So I can't unravel the entire history of refugee migration since the mid-1990s. But this is a Palestinian Syrian refugee in his allotment garden where nobody speaks with him. He just dished out this massive meal for us. The Turkish families I've worked with, they're always trying to be so generous and invite me to feasts in the name of Allah, really. So this is the other side of, it's just crazy how through food, people accuse each other of locking the other side out. And that was not the case in the past, so I'm not quite clear when that came into being. So my Turkish friends explained the rules, financial costs and meaning of fasting during Ramadan. They take me to the animal slaughter festival in July, and are very open. So it was in this situation, when we could not involve the Turkish mosque across the road, that we invited working class people to an intercultural workshop on the perceptions of the local ecology. Turkish friends, namely the couple Adam and Sumera Yaka, prepared a meal. So they are Adam, you can see them at the front of the large photograph, Adam and Sumera. He is a journalist and a farmer. She's a school teacher. Their children had prepared this beautiful little sculpture. They made the Ark, Noah's Ark. And it's not just the animals that I want you to have a look at, but the food in the back of the Ark. So they had prepared this fantastic dish, a big pot of ashure, of Noah's soup, which consists of nuts, seeds, fruit, salty, savory, sweet flavors, cooked together into the one thing. And the German workers who were there at that same workshop all knew the story of Noah's Ark, the great flooding, which everybody connected to the Anthropocene, rising of sea levels, humanity without restraint behavior kind of thing. But for my Turkish friends, it was important to foreground the intercultural tensions in the local neighborhoods. And they said, we are all sitting around eating from that same pot, like around a fan, right, in friendship. But we'll never be the same. We need to coexist. So Jordan is not an immigration country. It might be getting there, but that was the political background for their, they took over the workshop in the sense they turned themselves into hosts by preparing a meal and feeding us in their own terms. But we were trying to look at images of the local ecology that everybody gave us ideas and associations to. Okay, I'm finishing up, Sophie. This is just little for you. I have a final slide. Use some far. Thinking through eating, I think it does work, and I have to do a lot more work myself on that. But thinking through eating, especially thinking through Northern human eating, helps us to challenge the ontological politics of our research, of our theories, and of our methodologies. It enables us to move towards an increasingly embodied research practice. And I want to add to that, it might do that, and I think it's very valuable, and I think most presentations went that way with the material turn, right? But at the same time, food stuff matter is becoming increasingly scripted, right? Through AI, through engineered foods, and so forth. So I think it's going to be an evolving story of how we deal with materiality, including foods. Thank you.